From Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA, and the home of hot chicken, it's the Rick Altizer Show. Sit back, buckle up. Rick will talk with the movers, shakers, and creators who put Christ in Christian entertainment. He's a man who's clear so the world can hear. Here's Rick Altizer.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. Today, on the show, I've got Jay and Sofia Lyons. They are filmmakers that have just made a new movie called The Long Goodbye, the Kara Tippetts story. We're going to talk about that DVD that's coming out. And Jay and Sofia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rick.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
So I'm in Nashville. You guys are in Burbank, California.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're upset that it was not in the 60s today, but we'll live.
Yes. And so through the miracle of modern technology, we're doing this interview. And, I want to just say I saw this movie that you guys made, The Long Goodbye, the Kara Tippetts story. And oh, my goodness, what a powerful film. And, I'd like for my listeners to kind of know about it. So, instead of me trying to muddle my way through talking about what the movie's about, well, why don't you guys just kind of fill us in? What is this movie? What's it about?
Well, Kara Tippetts was just an ordinary, regular mom, and she had 4 children and was a pastor's wife, and she passed away due to breast cancer a few years ago.
She was also a mommy blogger. She started a blog that blew up called Mundane Faithfulness, and writing was part of her process of kind of her healing and kind of, giving updates to people. And that grew and grew and grew. And it grew into several books and a publishing deal. And then she actually went on to win Christian Book of the Year.
And so you made a film. You started documenting the last part of her life. Can we talk about that a little bit, about exactly what was in the film, kind of where you went from how you found her and then where the movie went?
I am a TV film producer guy, and I live in Los Angeles. And so I have worked on, reality shows and documentary type shows. We like to call them docu-follows. So people get scared of, reality TV shows. And believe it or not, I wanted to do a show or thought about doing a TV type show on people that are dying. And that sounds maybe odd, but as a Christian and a person of faith, I felt like if the topic was tackled correctly and handled with dignity and grace, that it could be beautiful. So, I don't know. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that was what started the process. And then we actually met Kara Tippetts through one of my husband's friends from high school on Facebook, believe it or not. And I think Jay just kind of put out a Facebook post that said, "Hey, I'm looking for women."
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
No, I saw them post.
Oh.
My friend said, "Pray for my pastor's wife. She is struggling with cancer."
Okay. And then you reached out to your friend and said,
yes.
So Jay reached out to his friend on Facebook and said, "I saw your post. Do you think that your pastor's wife would talk to us?"
And she said, I think she would. And she reached out to her. And that woman was Kara. And Kara did say, "I would love to talk to your friend," which was me. And I was actually on another show at that time. And it's very demanding when you're on these shows, Rick. So they kind of just have you. And so I'm just working, and nothing else in my life can exist. And so I didn't reach out to Kara. I just kind of had her contact. And then a few months later, I saw that they had made another Facebook post that said, "Pray for, Kara. She's not doing well. She's in stage 4 cancer." And I thought to myself, well, okay, I think I missed this window because it might be, inappropriate or something for me to contact her at this point. But I couldn't get her out of my mind. And I think that was God just saying to me over and over, call her. And I couldn't get her out of my mind. And then my lovely wife one day walked in and handed me the phone and said, "You're calling Kara today." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "No, I can't do that. I can't do that. It won't go well and it's not right." And she said, "This is what you need to do." And I called Kara and we struck up a relationship, and we Skyped with her and her husband that night, and it went wonderfully. And then that led to a trip to where we just went and visited them. And the first thing that we did was we're just going to do a piece for them that'll be a keepsake for their family that they can share, and then maybe I would pitch that around to some networks is how it initially started. And then we made that 3-minute trailer for them out of our first visit, and Kara shared that on her blog, and I think in a week it got 320,000 views on YouTube, and then 100 outlets on the internet covered it, including like the Washington Post and a lot of big outlets nationwide, worldwide, covered the trailer. And this was near the end of Kara's life. And so that kind of just vaulted the whole thing into a national conversation. And then I asked Kara, I said, I think there's something more here. I think the answer is to do this documentary on you. And she was like, that's great. And she was just all open for whatever. She was just an open book, and she loved sharing her life and sharing her love with others. So that's kind of how it happened.
So the DVD of this, March 22nd, came out, and it's the 4th anniversary of when she went to be with the Lord. So how long, when you started filming, how long before she went to heaven?
Okay, I'm doing the math on my fingers. You can't see me. I think the first time several months. It was not very long at all. And we told you we Skyped with her, and I think that was maybe in October or November. And then went to go visit her, I think January in Colorado Springs, February in San Diego, and then back late February, early March, back to Colorado Springs. So it was a short amount of time that we had.
Sounds like 3 or 4 months of the last 3 or 4 months of her life you filmed, because there was and so just for my listeners, so what they've done is they've taken the last 3 or 4 months of this person's life who her husband was a pastor, she loved the Lord, and she had children. She's young, vibrant. What a kind, loving heart. And so navigating, how do I navigate when my life isn't what I thought it would be, and when God doesn't do what I thought God was going to do in my life, or is doing something that I do not like? For instance, I'm going to die. What an amazing topic. How did you navigate, if you don't mind, we just kind of get into it. How did you navigate that, the telling of that story of, we want to tell her story, but there's a deeper message here, which is, how do I navigate my faith when things don't work out the way I think they should, or the way I want them to?
That's a great question. And Kara made everyone feel at ease when you were with her. So it sounds like it may be uncomfortable or awkward, but the moment you walked into the room with Kara, she made you feel welcomed, no matter that she lay there dying. And so here we were coming in, it wasn't a big crew, but, obviously with cameras. And her attitude was, one of her friends said it beautifully. She said, whoever was in front of Kara, she loved. And Kara just welcomed us and accepted us and told, invited us into her world and told her story to us. But, what's interesting about Kara is her message is suffering and dying, but it affects everybody kind of in a different way. So I, for instance, don't have any major health issues, but Kara changed me tremendously by the way that she lived her life. So her story on the outside is suffering and dying, but really when you take a deeper look at it, you nailed it, Rick. It's more about how do we handle when our story doesn't look like what we thought it was supposed to look like. Do we still trust God? Do we still turn to Him? And do we still love Him and live for Him in that moment? And that's what Kara teaches everybody. And that's what the movie is really about, through the lens of somebody who is dying and suffering. So she has so much credibility, because when she opens her mouth to speak, you have to believe her because she's living it. You can see it, So it's extremely real and raw, this documentary. To touch back real quick on what you said about how much time we have with her, we didn't have a lot of time with her. So a lot of the stuff that's in this movie is self-shot stuff from Kara with her phone. She did a lot of vlogs. She, before she passed away, she turned over all of her footage to me and said, "Hey, make something beautiful with this. Do what you can do. You know, I love your art, and make something beautiful." And so it's extremely raw and real. You're with Kara along this journey for several years at the end of her life. And then we kind of came in the last few months and started shooting and producing it a little more in that realm. But there's just a lot of aspects to it. I hope I answered the question well, or Sophia can maybe cover parts that I didn't hit.
I think the obvious answer is the film shows on the surface cancer, breast cancer, which affects 1 in 8 women, unfortunately, suffering and dying. And most people are not comfortable with even discussing suffering and dying, let alone someone who is actually suffering and dying. It's just something that most people don't feel comfortable sharing while it's happening. And beneath the surface, the film is really about the preciousness of time. You know, Kara said, "I know I'm dying, but you're dying too. We're all dying. I just get told I'm dying every day." And so what becomes important each day, if you think I'm going to die soon, is very different than when you kind of live a life thinking that we have a guarantee of living in old age, like to old age. So the big takeaways that people, I think, when they met Kara or when they watch this film, are going to be, what is my legacy going to be? And what does time mean? You know, so what am I going to do with my time?
You're listening to the Rick Altizer Show. My guest today are Jay and Sofia Lyons. They are filmmakers, and we're talking about the new movie, The Long Goodbye, the Kara Tippetts story. It's available now on DVD. Where can people find information before we go further on just a website they could go to get more info about the film?
The KaraTippettsDocumentary.com. That's KaraTippettsDocumentary.com.
That's
and
T-I-P. That's Kara with a K, and Tippetts is Tippetts. Documentary.com.
Yes, thank you.
And so I'll just tell you about when I saw the movie. I was deeply moved. And when I was done with it, I just ran to my wife and just hugged her and looked at her in the face and told her, "I love you so much. I'm so thankful God has given me you, and I don't want to take one day for granted with you." That's how the movie affected me. Realizing we don't have tomorrow isn't a promise, and we take our loved ones for granted. We get all up in arms about, oh, whatever, my life isn't what I want it to be, or blah blah blah, or you said something I didn't like, and we major in the minors, and we're so self-righteous and full of ourselves that we can't even move forward half the time. And the movie really knocked me out of any kind of self-centeredness in that way. It really impacted me. It made me realize God has given me a precious gift in my wife, and I just wanted to let her know how much I loved her and how important she was to me. And so that's how the movie affected me. And she just kind of looked at me and goes, "Okay." But
that's so sweet. I'm glad that it impacted you.
It did. It made a big impact on me. And so I want to ask you, as filmmakers, as a married couple and filmmakers, you're going through this story of, the big questions, and seeing this tragedy and seeing how Kara and her husband, Jason, who's a pastor, how they navigated this together, and they're so kind and loving to one another. And talk to me about how that impacted you personally and your marriage.
I think it's one of the first things I want to answer is that when we first met Jason and Kara, it was over Skype. And when we were done with that Skype session, I thought, gosh, I love this couple. When you meet couples and you're like, we would go on vacation together, do ministry together. You just are so in sync with their beliefs, and they're such a cool couple. And I thought, I just love them. And I thought she was so vibrant and cool and fun and pretty. she's not going to die. You know, that was my first thought. How could she be dying? I mean, she just had so much life in her eyes and passion. And watching her disintegrate quickly, though, as a married couple, watching them kind of say goodbye to one another was very difficult to be that close to. And I think I just started to ask myself the questions, am I prepared for death? You know, they went over, Kara and Jason covered all their bases. They talked about everything you could possibly imagine that you could or should or would talk about with your spouse before you knew one of them was going to pass away. Kara talked to Jason about him remarrying and gave full blessing, and even like kind of joked with her friends about, hey, help Jason make sure he picks a good wife and a good mom for my kids when I'm gone. And that's one example that just kind of blew me away, was just that she was just so comfortable and accepted that she was going to die. And she said a couple of things that have stuck with me. One, she said, because I kept asking her, are you still praying for healing, even though everybody's telling you that you're going to die? And she said, you know, I pray for healing, and it's a different type of healing. It's a spiritual healing. It's a prayer for a soft heart, that God would keep my heart soft. And it's a prayer that I can love others well, and that I can pour out God's love onto them. And then as far as a married couple, you know, I think one of the toughest days that Jay and I had filming was when we went to San Diego for Jason and Kara's last Valentine's Day together. And just as a married couple, being in the room with them, I could barely breathe. It was just a mix of joy and sorrow and beauty and devastation, but God's presence was so thick because they invited him in. And they never once said, oh, this story sucks, we don't like this. They just said, you know, this is the story that God gave us, and this story is still good.
I think from a married couple answering that question, how it's affected us, or how it's affected me, I can say is it helps me to remember to be kind. My wife and I will tend to bicker, or I know none of your listeners, of course, ever, you know, argue with their spouses, but we love each other. We've been married 25 years. But, you know, we tend to just be short with each other and let's get this job done. And we're workers, you know, we're hard workers. So,
and we might not be very kind with our words.
Yeah. So we're those types that will have, you know, blow up fights, but then we make up quick. So I think in those moments of kindness, just watching Kara and Jason, they impacted me personally, is to remember the big picture, like you said, Rick. The big picture is that we're on the same team. This life is so short, and the Bible says it's like the blink of an eye. So if you think we have the blink of an eye to love our neighbors, to make an impact for God's kingdom while we're here on earth, we don't have time to be bickering or arguing, or like the Bible says, quarreling over little things that don't matter. And one of the fruit of the Spirit is, you know, joy and peace and kindness. So that convicted me to see them be kind to each other, even when she's suffering and dying, and she still finds space for kindness, and he finds space for kindness, even though he's doing all the chores at the moment and carrying the entire load of the household. And I think, well, you know, I'm doing all the chores and I'm doing this or that, and my wife's doing this, and, you know, so that's the impact it had on me. And it's real. I'm reminded of her after watching this movie, and I'm glad to hear that it impacted you positively as well. But I think she had that impact on everybody. But yeah, I think of it a lot. I think of her a lot.
You're listening to the Rick Altizer Show. My guests today, Jay and Sofia Lyons. We're talking about the new movie that they have made together called The Long Goodbye, The Kara Tippetts Story. It's available on DVD now, and you can find information about the DVD and the movie by going to KaraTippettsDocumentary.com, and I'm going to spell that again. That's Kara with a K, K-A-R-A, and Tippetts is Tippetts, KaraTippettsDocumentary.com. You know, sometimes I'm just going to talk about just a little bit. they're not paying me to say this, but every time there are times when you watch something, and sometimes you watch something, it's entertaining and you go great, and then you kind of forget about it. But then every now and then you'll see something and it impacts you. It changes you. It does something to you. And to me, that's where filmmaking is at its best. It's when it can make you better and helps you to see something that, you've been not looking at, but seeing something from a different perspective. But this movie really impacted me. It changed me. It was one of those things that after I watched it, it's like, I'm so glad I saw that. I feel like I've grown by watching this. And like I said, it made me be so appreciative of what God has given me and so thankful for just this day that I have today. I have a healthy wife and we have a good marriage, and I'm just so blessed. And so that is so amazing that you did that, and it made that kind of impact. And I do encourage my listeners to go look this documentary up, watch it online, find the DVD, go track this thing down. It's really worth it. It's one of those things that you'll be glad you did. So as a filmmaker, you spend so much time on the back end in editing and looking at the footage and going through all this footage. And you've got about 4 minutes left in our interview here. But in the last 4 minutes, can you guys just kind of tell me then, you're dealing with a pretty heavy-duty subject and you're really being immersed in it. How did you deal with this just emotionally? Okay, we're going to now spend 6 months editing this thing of just kind of being immersed in this person who's dying and trying to tell her story in a way. You're crafting the story as you edit it. How did you deal with that just emotionally and not getting depressed?
Well, first of all,
let me answer it. Me.
Okay.
I'll answer first. I would say the thing that kept me going and was just remembering Kara asking me to make this as big and bold and amazing as I could. And so for me, this was a promise I made to Kara. And so that kind of kept me going. But emotionally, I kept this mantra of, this is going to impact millions of people worldwide. This is going to help people open the curtain to suffering and dying, because Kara obviously was meant to tell this story. And so that kind of kept me going. It was emotionally very tough to, meet someone, fall in love with them. I just adored her, and then have to say goodbye to her, and then carry on her legacy. It was a lot, but I just kept thinking, okay, this is going to be worth it. This is going to impact so many people's lives.
And first of all, it wasn't just 6 months of editing. It was 4 years. Now, it wasn't constant 4 years, but it was putting the pieces together over the years. But thank you for the kind words about the documentary, Rick. Very much appreciate it, and know that a lot of people will have that same impact. And when I say that, it's not a thing about us making the film. Honestly, the sincere truth about this movie is that we felt like God was going to tell this story and tell Kara's story and spread it around the world with the movie. And then he just chose us to do that, because her story is so much bigger and needs to be heard by so many people. So we felt honored just to be chosen to do that story. And so we just feel like we're a small part of it. And the movie was going to be made no matter what. It just had to be. Like, her story, she affected so many people. How did
it affect you emotionally?
Well, I guess personally, I did cry when I would watch the footage, but there is after the fact. I think when I was with her, I tended to be more in producer mode, and my wife was more just kind of friend mode. That's how we relate differently. So I think when we were there, I had my producer hat on. But afterwards, I would watch it and I would cry. And also our editor, who is a fabulous editor, she is not a believer. And I would watch the impact that this movie had on her editing it. And it was powerful. It changed her life, and she's been opened up. We had so many faith conversations, and she would hear Kara quote Bible verses and in the midst of her suffering. And the editor, she would just turn to me just like dumbstruck, like, how could she say this? And how could she think this? So
Well, it's a powerful documentary. We're talking about The Long Goodbye, the Kara Tippetts story. You can go get information about it. Google it, The Long Goodbye, the Kara Tippetts story. And guess what? We're out of time, guys. Jay, Sofia, Lyons, thanks so much for being on the show. This was awesome. And I just encourage everyone to go see this film. It's so powerful. It's life-changing. And it made a big impact on me, and I encourage you to see it. And thank you guys so much for being on the show today.
Well, you're an amazing host, and thank you so much for having us.
If there's a show you've missed, you can go to my website, rickaltizer.com, and catch up. Or you can listen to my podcast in iTunes or wherever you hear your podcasts. Just search for The Rick Altizer Show. Altizer is spelled Altizer. I want to thank you for listening. Hey, would you tell a friend about this show and share the love? Be sure to check us out again next week as we discuss how we communicate the gospel through media to our culture. Let's be clear so the world can hear. I'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening.